Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This week's guest is Daniel Ferri, a man from Australia. I gotta say, I absolutely love talking to this guy. He has a great story, and he gives some of the greatest advice that I've ever heard. I'd probably say if I wasn't an American, I'd be an Australian. I absolutely love the accent. Australians seem so warm and friendly. I've met a few Australians here in Denver, Colorado, and they have been just the warmest and nicest people that I've ever met. And Daniel was a very good guest. He was very nice and kind and friendly, and loved talking to him and hearing about all the stories that he has and the great advice. Also, I didn't know this until the podcast that we talk about London, and I did not know that Big Ben was the actual bell inside the tower. It is not the tower itself. It is the bell inside the tower. I didn't know that. And thank you, Daniel, for informing me about that. Like I said, this week's guest is Daniel Ferri, and I hope you all enjoy the podcast. See you on the next one.
Come away for a year and a day to a place where the sand meets the sea. For your worries, they will fade when you sleep under the shade of the marvelous cannabis tree.
Dan, welcome back. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So you live in Australia?
I do, yeah. I live in Brisbane, which is in Queensland, so it's a more kind of tropical part of Australia. So third largest city in Australia. So yeah.
So how's the weather out there right now?
Well, it's winter right now for us in the southern hemisphere, so it's reasonably cool. It's about 23 odd degrees Celsius, so it's pleasant to be outside. I wouldn't call it cold. I've been to colder places. In summer, though, it's not uncommon for us to hit, 40 degrees Celsius in the middle of summer during the day, so it can get quite warm here. That's all right.
So I live in America, and we're not up to the rest of the world when it comes to the metric side of the measurements. And so what is that degree in Fahrenheit?
That's a good question. Well, so
I'm gonna take a Google here.
Your body temperature is meant to be 37 degrees. So if I say it's 40, it's warmer than your body temperature.
Okay.
So, yeah, if that helps to put it into...
Yeah. So it says here, too, you lived in London. So when did you go?
I did, yeah.
When did you go from Australia to London?
That was in 2010. So I kind of went through one of those... I wouldn't call it a midlife crisis because I was 27, 28, but I decided that I needed my life to change. I wasn't really happy with who I was and how I was living and everything else. So got healthy, lost a lot of weight, tried to improve myself, become spiritually and mentally a better person. And along the way, met a girl. And we were talking very early on in those first couple of weeks, as you do, and we both spoke about the fact that the idea of moving overseas and moving to London would work for us. And so 6 months later we quit. Well, she had already quit her job and I quit my job, and we packed a suitcase each and we travelled over to the UK. And
so a couple questions.
Yeah.
So what were you guys doing before you left, and do you require a travel passport going from country to country? Because here in America we do.
Yeah. So
okay.
In terms of what we were doing before we left, she was a data analyst for a financial investment company. She's a mathematician by trade, I suppose, from university. I was in IT, so I was looking after IT for an engineering company. I looked after about 14 sites around the country. So that's what our careers were. I wasn't particularly tied to my career, and neither was she. In terms of traveling, I mean, we've got to have passports like everyone else in the world. In terms of living and moving in the UK, though, because we're all part of the Commonwealth, there's something called the Youth Mobility Visa. So any Australian, if you're under the age of 31, can move to the UK for 2 years and live and work in the UK under this Youth Mobility Visa, and then move back to Australia. So that's just a Commonwealth thing. I'm pretty sure we can do the same thing if we go to Canada. We can go to Canada for a period of time. and just live and work there and then come back. So that's what we initially did, although in the end, because we stayed there for a while, both of us have grandparents that were originally born in the UK, and that allowed us to change our visas to what's called an ancestral visa, which means we were a returning POM, and that's what allowed us to stay there for 4 years in the end.
So you said your grandparents were born in the UK?
One of my grandparents was. So,
Okay.
Yeah, my grandmother on my father's side was born in the UK.
Okay.
And she came over as what's called a 10-pound POM, which was a lot of the English came over in the 50s and 60s.
Why did they do that?
Well, after World War II, a lot of them either had been orphaned, or the homes had been destroyed, or the country was trying to rebuild, because particularly the southeastern part of the UK was quite heavily bombed during the war, and so they were looking for a different kind of lifestyle, I guess. And so they're called 10-pound POMs because you could buy a 10-pound ticket and they'd put you on a boat and they'd boat you over to Australia, and you'd either get off in Perth or over in Sydney or Brisbane, and they were just looking for a different life, I guess, and not much different than the reason why I moved over there.
So how was the traveling?
Look, I think everyone should travel outside of their own country at some point. I think it's important to get outside of your comfort zone and experience the rest of the world. If you're going to immigrate to another country, Australia to England is not that hard. We speak the same language. Most of our culture is pretty much the same. Australia was an English colony, but much more recent than America was. And so it's not that hard to move over there. You can fit in pretty easy. And the English like Australians, so we're like long lost cousins to them. So we come over and they like us. So it's pretty easy to immigrate to the UK. What was really interesting, though, was then moving around the other countries, because that's the reason we went there, was to see other places and do stuff. And so as we then toured around Europe and went into Eastern Europe a little bit and into some of the Middle Eastern countries, you learn a lot. You see how the other half lives, so to speak. You just learn a lot about other cultures. And I think if everyone did a little bit of traveling when they were younger, I think we'd all be a more accepting people.
Definitely.
I think there'll be less ignorance about things and more just, and people go, well, we're all just different. We all just do things differently, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you got to London, what was your first step?
So my wife had a cousin that lived in London, and she had a spare room in her house. So we knew we had a place to stay, at least temporarily. And this is where the plan kind of deviated a little bit, because our plan was to
always
do. They do, life's what happens when you're busy making plans. And so, our plan was to go over there and just work in bars and maybe backpack around a little bit and do those typical Australian gap year kind of things, just get out there. And what we did in the end was we moved into her cousin's spare room for a little bit, and we both just got what I refer to as adult jobs, and not adult as in inappropriate. I mean grown-up, responsible 9-to-5 jobs. So that kind of changed the plan a little bit from backpacking around to, well, no, okay, we'll get settled. We'll work these 9-to-5 jobs, which are paying us quite well. And with all the money that we have, we'll just travel on the weekends and take our holidays and go places. So, planned to stay there for 6 months to a year, became 4 years. And we came home because we figured it was time to get married and start a family, and we knew that had to happen back home in Australia. So we left.
So when you say you knew, was it just a legal thing, or is it just that's what you guys felt like you had to do?
It felt like we had to do. Legally, we could have stayed and had kids in the UK. Because we'd been there for 4 years, if we had stayed another 2 years, we could have applied for citizenship and gone through the process. But no, there was no legal reason. We could have stayed longer if we wanted to. We both had jobs that, if we hadn't quit, would have kept going. In actual fact, my wife's job is an Australian company that had offices in London, so they actually transferred her back to Australia, which was really good. So that meant that we had a job to come back to. But no, it was our decision that not so much getting married, because we can get married wherever we want, but having children was something that that needs to happen back home. When we're near family and near that support group. And if we were to raise a child, we're like, well, we don't want to really raise a child in the middle of London. We want to raise a child, in Brisbane, which we think is a much
Mm-hmm.
nicer place to live. So yeah, it was just it was time. We'd been there for 4 years, we'd seen things. It was time to come home and put some roots down, I guess.
So did you have? So when you were in London, did you have any like you said you wanted to go, bartend for a little bit? Did you actually like have any good bar stories?
Good bar stories. Well, yeah, I guess a couple of good bar stories in London. So, where we lived most of the time, because we only stayed with her cousin for a little bit, and then we moved out and got our own place. By our own place, I mean we shared a house with some other flatmates. It was right next to an old pub called the Ship, which is about 400 or so years old.
Mm-hmm.
But that particular pub is famous for having a lot of reality stars and soap opera stars go drinking at that particular pub. It's just what it's famous for. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for us to be at that pub, and famous people would come in, and people want to get photos with them and all that. But probably the best celebrity we bumped into would have to be we had a friend of ours whose parents lived in some tiny town out in the west of England. I can't remember the name of the town. And we went and stayed with her parents for a couple of days, just to kind of see some of the countryside. And we were having dinner in a pub one night, and turns out it's the town where Bear Grylls lives when he's not climbing Mount Everest or something.
Really?
Yeah, and so we got to go over and shake hands and get a photo with him, and he's a really nice guy. And he's friendly. And he talked to us for a couple of minutes, and yeah, that was good fun. So it's probably the best kind of celebrity run-in that we've had. So, but yeah, I think drinking in pubs in the UK is the same as everywhere else. It's just different food, different beer, but the same thing.
We don't have a lot of drinking songs here in America. I mean, there's like
Right.
one or two good ones. Did you get any of the good old like drinking songs in the bars?
The drinking songs are less to do, I think, with the bars and more to do with the sports teams. So they have
Okay.
lots of songs
Okay.
for their sports teams,
Mm-hmm.
particularly football or soccer. Yeah, for them, there's lots of songs that come along with that. So we never really chimed into it. We never really got too involved in the sports. If anyone asked us, we supported Chelsea. That's only because it was the closest team to us where we lived, and so we had to pick a team. But yeah, no, we never really got into the singing in the bar kind of thing. It only kind of happens when people are watching football.
Mm-hmm.
But we did, though, just random things that happened. Ended up in a bar one night in the middle of the city in Leicester Square, and the cricket was on, and it was Australia versus India. And so we thought, we might as well go in and just see what's going on. And there was obviously a large contingent of Indian supporters that had come to this one particular bar. And yeah, if you think that the English can be loud and boisterous and sing their songs in support of their teams, yeah, the Indian supporters are a whole another level. Yelling at the screen, and almost as if they believe that if they yell loud enough, the players will actually hear it on the other side of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that was a fun night though. They were very welcoming. They were happy to have Australians there. If only they could, point at us and laugh every time they won. So that's all right.
And seen any good fights?
I got into one completely by accident one night. My brother had come over for a visit, and we went out drinking in the middle of London. And they have these things in the middle of London, pop-up urinals. So
Pop-up
during the day,
urinals?
they pop-up urinals. So in the middle of
Okay.
the day, they just look like a giant manhole cover. They're about, I was about to say 1.5 meters, but let's say 4 to 5 foot, diameter,
Mm-hmm.
round things on the ground. And then in the evening, particularly on the weekends, they lift up out of the ground, and it's 3 urinals all facing in. So three guys can kind of stand around the outside and urinate in. And the idea, obviously, being that it stops people from just pissing in the gutter, right? You can just walk up to this urinal and whatever. And I was using one because we'd had a lot to drink, and I must have looked from behind like someone this guy knew, and I hear this, "Oi, what are you doing here?" kind of thing. And so I finish up and turn around, and he was quite a big bloke, and he just grabbed my shoulders and headbutt me right on my nose, and busted it up a little bit, and there was a little bit of blood and everything else. And yeah, then I just kind of fell to the ground because that was unexpected and that hurt. And yeah, he just wandered off with his mates. So yeah,
He
that
just
was
walks up,
exciting.
headbutts you, and be like, "All right, see you later."
Yeah, pretty much. I must have looked like someone. He must have thought I was someone
Yeah.
else. Is the only thing I can think of why he
Yeah.
would do it. But yeah, that's exciting.
Hmm. So did you get to see the Queen at all? In
Not see as
passing?
in person. My wife for a while worked literally about 50 meters down the road from Buckingham Palace. So she would watch the changing of the guard and everything else, during her lunch break. We were there for the royal wedding when William married Kate. So we kind of, were amongst the millions of people just kind of around. So we kind of got to see the balcony from a distance. But no, they never invited me to dinner. The closest I got to it was I worked for a while for the Lawn Tennis Association, and so, which is part of it's the national organization that looks after tennis, and then there's Wimbledon, which is one of the championships, and so it has a hand in organizing Wimbledon, and so I worked on site at Wimbledon during the championships, and then go back to the LTA in the off season, and they would hold the Wimbledon Ball each year, which is the formal event where the players would be recognised with awards and all that kind of stuff. And so I got to go along to that for a couple of times. And yeah, the patron of the LTA was the Princess Royal, and so she would be in attendance. So I technically got to have dinner with the Royal, but
Nice.
yeah, I couldn't get
Nice.
anywhere near her. There were guards with machine guns and all that kind of stuff. So
Like slipper your number. Like, hey, have William call me.
yeah, she didn't look like the kind of person that would take that idea on. Yeah, she
Oh.
was. Yeah, I got the impression it was a bit past her bedtime. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, these turned into quite late night affairs, and at some point she just discreetly pops off, and everyone keeps on drinking for a bit. So yeah.
Oh, well, hey. So how was it seeing Buckingham Palace? Like, is it as beautiful?
Yeah.
Is it as beautiful as I see it in the pictures?
It is. It is. You can do a tour inside. You don't get to see everything, of course. You can just do part of it, and only when there's no one staying there right now. So we did, we did the touristy things. We went and did the tour. What's kind of amazing about, and more so Windsor Castle than Buckingham Palace, is the artwork that they have inside. So, you're walking through these rooms, and they have on the wall, Rembrandts and Da Vinci's and paintings by all these famous people, and sculptures from Michelangelo and all this kind of stuff. And it's just because they bought it, and it's either an investment for them, there's money in these things, or they possibly stole it from someone a couple of thousand years ago and just never let it go. And yeah, so that's probably the most amazing part, is this this amazing artwork that they have. And it's there are some things that are obviously quite ostentatious. So if you watched the coronation, you would have seen Charles in the golden carriage, which is only really used for coronations, and so you can see the golden carriage there, and it's all very sparkly and looks nice and all that kind of stuff. There's obviously a lot of money spent on it. I don't know. I'm slightly torn over the monarchy these days. I used to have a very different opinion, and these days I'm a little bit more. I don't know.
I am and was and always will be a big fan of the Queen. She was just a sweet old lady and had a great sense of humor. And I loved her in the 007 little promo.
Yes.
That was great.
Yeah.
That was great.
That was very cool. No one was expecting that, because traditionally, certainly the family hasn't, and she has never really done too much of that kind of stuff. Always very prim and proper, always standing quite aloof. But then, yeah, she got quite involved in the Olympic opening ceremony, and it was very cool to see that. I mean, it was obviously she didn't actually jump out of the helicopter, but it was very cool to see it. That
was my first question.
A bit of a good sport.
Did she actually jump out of that thing?
So, but no, it's no, that was good to see, and I think a lot of people had respect for her more so than the institution. So I think that's what'll be interesting now over the next couple of years, is whether or not that respect will transfer to King Charles, or whether or not it won't.
Even down to William and Kate. You know what I mean? I'm hoping that they show the same respect to the institution as William and Kate, as much as they did the Queen.
Yeah.
Don't know a lot about Prince Charles. King Charles now.
King Charles now. I think Australia has a bit of a different relationship with the monarchy than most other countries, and I think it's because when we look at, why does the monarchy exist? We're
Mm-hmm.
one of the few countries that has a reason for it. So, most of the Commonwealth countries, it has the monarchy as head of state. In theory, the king or the queen can step in and intervene into
Mm-hmm.
politics if they need to, but they don't. Generally, they stay out of it. Um, Australia back in the 70s had what's referred to as our constitutional crisis when, we have, much like you have a Congress and a Senate, we have a lower house and an upper house. And the two of them couldn't agree, and there was lots of infighting, and nothing was happening. And essentially, the government just kind of came to a stall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the Queen did step in, and the Governor General, who is her representative in Australia, fired our Prime Minister. He was like your president, and threw pretty much everyone out and said, "We're going to a general election. We're going to start again." And it's one of those things where you see this happen in other countries. I'm sure there's some people in America right now that might love the idea of throwing everyone out and starting again. So yeah, I think that's why Australians have a bit of a funny thing. Some of us, I wasn't alive for that, but I see that as they actually did have a purpose. Like there was a period of time there where we did actually need them to do their job, which was that,
Mm-hmm.
and be the impartial referee and come in and hit everyone over the head. So yeah,
Yeah,
but whether or
yeah.
not we need it in the future, I don't know.
It's here in America. It's looking like that. It's kind of like let's just start over, and we'll hope for the best.
Yeah, I feel sorry for a lot of you guys actually right now because
It's
I
it's a bit of
there's
a
no right or
whirlwind.
wrong answer for you.
Yeah, it's a bit of
There's
a whirlwind. So I
yeah,
mean,
it feels like everyone's too busy fighting each other to actually sit back and go, well, what do we need to do and what can
hmm
we do to go and take the country forward? Um, it's
that
and
yeah,
yeah,
it's two party system, and it's starting to get it's everybody just, and then the people's own party will attack themselves. It's
yeah,
like
it's
at what point do we all just go, hey guys, let's start over? Where's the queen
yeah,
when we need her? Like, where is she?
yeah, nah,
So, so you're in London for a couple years, and
yeah.
did it take a little bit of time to get adjusted to London as a culture wise, as living? I don't know. Was your where you came from Australia? Did it kind of look like where you lived in London, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, no. So Brisbane's considered a subtropical region, so it gets quite warm in summer and doesn't really go below zero in winter. So,
Mm-hmm.
whereas London, it snowed every winter that we were in London. So, it will not ever snow in Brisbane. So, yeah, they were built quite differently. London's all stone and that kind of stuff, where Brisbane's mostly wooden houses and that kind of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of culture, it's very similar. We came from there. We speak the same language.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of the same jokes. We play the same sports. It's certainly Australia and England, for example, are closer in culture than Australia and America. Um, but even then, it does take a while to blend in. It's the little things that you have to get used to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the little nuances. Like when you walk into a shop and someone wants to greet you in the store, what they'll say is, "You're right." Which in Australia, if someone says, "Are you all right?" it's either a genuine question, like, "Are you okay?" or it's said as almost as an insult, like, "Are you all right?" Whereas in London, "You all right?" is just their "G'day, how you doing?" It's just their standard greeting they give to a stranger on the street. So little things like that you kind of have to get used to. And yeah, there's cultural things, like the drinking culture is very different. As an Australian, I thought Australians drank a lot. No, the Brits drink way more than we do. Um, yeah, so it took a while to get there. Like I said, we had it easy because you speak the same language, so you kind of just slot in. But all the little tiny things. It's do you tip in certain restaurants? Tipping is not mandatory like it is in America, but some restaurants still kind of expect a tip. Even little things like hailing a cab is done differently.
Mm-hmm.
In London, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you just have to learn what things mean. And like for us where I live, alcohol is only sold in shops that sell alcohol. Right? So you can't go into your supermarket and buy alcohol. You have to go to what we call a liquor store or a bottler
Yeah,
and buy
yeah.
alcohol. Whereas in London, you can buy alcohol wherever, on any street corner and in any shop. And so you got to get used to this idea that you're walking down the the shopping center, and or here's all the fruit juices. There's orange juice, and so the next one must be champagne mixed with orange juice in a bottle because that makes sense. You put that near the orange juice, and things like that that are just kind of a little bit weird to kind of get used to. And yeah, I think again, when you're working in a job there, it's different ways of working, different cultures in that job. So they swear, well, like Australians swear. The Brits don't swear with particular words. Like they say things that are kind of curse words that aren't, like they say damn a fair bit and that and bollocks. But if you actually use, an F word or an S word or something else like that, you get a really bad look because that's just not done. Whereas in Australia, you'll swear as much as you like in an office and most people don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those kind of things are a bit different. But it's like anything. You can adapt to any kind of situation given enough time. And look, they are very lovely, friendly people. Most of them aren't Brits. Most people you meet in London are from somewhere else. London's a transient city. People don't, people aren't born, live and grow old in London. People come to London when they're between, 20 and 40 to work a job and to make their money or to get an education. Then they leave again. That's what London is. So
really, I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, it is. It's. I mean, it's a huge city and it's a hub for certain industries. It still exists there, but it's just not a. It's not a kid-friendly place. Like, certainly in the centre part of London where it's all just apartments, it's not. I mean, some people obviously have kids there and raise families there. Of course they do, but it's not what you would just call kid-friendly. Like if you had a choice of living and working in London while raising a small family, or if you could make the same money somewhere else, you'd probably just go somewhere else. I guess it's not that different from, you think about the center of New York. Yes, there are people there with families, but there's a huge population that go to New York to make their money and work on Wall Street.
Yeah.
And then when they've made their money, they move back out again. And so London's exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I feel about Denver, Colorado, because I moved from Ohio to Colorado. And that's how I really feel about Colorado. Just the culture, multiple types of cultures around here, and it just feels like exactly how you explained it. You come here to make your money, and then you might go somewhere else. So yeah, it's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and so you get a lot of international people doing the same thing, where they need to, because
I've met a few Australians out here.
Yeah, no, definitely. So as Australians like to travel as a general rule. We like to get out and travel. I don't know. I've got friends now that I grew up with that are living in the US, in various different places. And I've had lots of friends at different points in their lives that have lived overseas, including living in the US. So we never lived there. We my wife used to travel a lot to the US for work. So she was there at one point almost every month. I've been there for holidays. Never lived there. So
what part of the US? Did you
so my wife was constantly traveling to Boston and New York because that's where her company had offices and all that kind of stuff. But I've never done the East Coast. I did the West Coast. So we did a holiday trip once where she had a conference in Vegas to go to. So then I tagged along at the end of the conference, and then a whole bunch of, because it was near her birthday, so a whole bunch of her friends flew over and met us, and we partied in Vegas for a while. And then we hired a car and we drove essentially from Vegas to San Francisco, but we went through Death Valley and spent some time in Yosemite National Park and up that way. So yeah, I would really like to go back and see more of the national parks. Yosemite was absolutely beautiful, and I really want to go see Yellowstone one day. That's on my bucket list of places to go see. So
yeah, it's I haven't been there personally, but it looks beautiful. I got here about a year ago, and I'm still just trying to get my feet on the ground and start moving. So, so living in London, when you got there, how long did it take you to get the 9 to 5, as you said?
It took me about 2.5 months.
Yeah.
It took my wife about 1.5 months to get the 9 to 5 jobs. So yeah.
And then when you started traveling, where did you go?
So we had a lot of countries we wanted to go see. We did quite a few visits to Paris, because you literally can just catch the train from London to Paris. It takes about an hour, so it's quite
really, it's that close.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So because they've got the tunnel that goes underneath the English Channel, and yeah, so it took us longer to get from where we so we lived in Zone 2 of London, which puts us, not in the central CBD, but kind of in the next sector out is where we lived in
Hmm.
London, and we lived, in the southwest corner of that. And then there's a train station in the northeastern corner, King's Cross, which if you've ever played Monopoly, you know where King's Cross is. Also, where Harry goes to get on the Hogwarts Express. That's King's Cross.
Nine and three
And
quarter.
yeah, there you go.
Yep.
There is a plaque on the wall at that particular platform for that, and a little sign asking you to not run the trolleys into the wall as well, because yes, people still do that. Um, and so yeah, it would take us about an hour and a half to cross London, and so that took us longer than it did to get the train from King's Cross to Paris.
Hmm.
So
So,
yeah, Paris is about an hour 10 thereabouts. So.
did you check out the loo?
Yes, yes. So yeah, we saw ticked off all the things to do in Paris over multiple trips. Went to the Louvre, went to the Eiffel Tower. Crossed all the bridges. Did the whole lock thing on the bridge, all that sort of thing. Just ate a lot in Paris. You just want to eat. The food is amazing in Paris. It really is. We did a bit of Italy and went to Florence, went to Rome, did Vatican
How
City.
was Rome?
Rome was interesting. So I said my grandmother on my father's side was English. My grandfather on my father's side was Italian. So I'd always wanted to go to Rome and see Rome. And it's interesting because, you go into some parts of it, like the Colosseum is all crumbling and falling apart but you can imagine what it was like when it was fully built and all that. And yet there's other buildings in Rome that are, 2,500 years old that are still in perfect condition because they're still used every day.
Hmm.
So there's the Pantheon, which is in the center of Rome, which is an old a temple to the Roman gods, which has been converted to a Catholic temple now. But it's still in perfect shape because it's been used every day for the last 2,000 years. Yeah, the food is amazing in Rome. You really can just walk the little back streets and find little mum and pop restaurants that have like 4 or 5 tables, and you kind of pick a table and eat real carbonara and all that kind of stuff. The only downside we had is that there was a protest one of the days we were there. One of the workers' unions was protesting something that the government did, and that was a pretty big protest. And there was lots of people with flare guns and all that kind of stuff marching through Rome, and that was a bit, one of those situations where you're like, we're not comfortable being here right now, but we just found a Chinese restaurant and waited it out. So, but no, Rome, I really enjoyed it. Italian hot chocolate is amazing. So it's not like
Italian
watery hot
hot
chocolate.
chocolate.
If you can find a place that does Italian hot chocolate, your normal hot chocolate is quite runny, like it's you
Water and
pour it
powder
out. Yeah,
mix.
yeah.
Yeah.
Italian hot chocolate is really thick and syrupy. It has like the consistency of almost like honey, that kind of thing. Where if you tip the cup upside down, it would come out in a big blob. Um, Absolutely delicious. So we drank a lot of that.
Really? I might have to check
Yeah,
that out.
yeah. See if there's any local Italian coffee shops that do it.
I
Yeah.
just might have to do that. I do love me some hot chocolate. How was the Vatican?
Vatican was really interesting. Much like the royal family, they have a lot of artwork, and I think with a lot of these places, it depends on who your tour guide is. And we had a really great tour guide that focused on the artwork, and actually, as he took us through the Vatican, told us the story of artwork's development over 2,000 years. Because it really has. If you look at artwork from 2,000 years ago, it was all 2D. Artists hadn't yet worked out how to do a 3D representation of artwork. We just hadn't worked it out yet. And so he shows you this and this progression over time as different artists, discovered how to do a light source and how to do a 3D representation and how to put depth, perspective into paintings and all that other kind of stuff. So we had a really great tour guide that taught us all this. So we felt like we were learning, not just looking at stuff, but learning about stuff. Yeah, it is actually a really pretty place. And what you don't see a lot of is it also just has a lot of gardens. So there's a lot of garden space you can just walk around in, and there's coffee shops inside there, and you can get a coffee and then walk around the garden. And it's quite pleasant and nice. And I can understand how, back in the day, you got this big bustling city around you with all the noise and all the people, but there's this literally an enclave in the middle, which is just this quiet little, respite from all of that, where there's no noise and people talk in hushed whispers and all that kind of stuff. So
Really?
yeah, it was quite interesting. Well, I like I guess people just like you go into like say the Sistine Chapel's a little bit noisy because it's always rammed full of people because everyone's in there trying to look at the ceiling and all that kind of stuff. Um, and so that's cool. And again, if you heard the story of how it was painted, then you just understand it a lot more and all that. But then you come out into like St. Peter's Basilica, and yeah, people do just because it's still an active church. People still hold church services there. People generally speaking are just quite even if you're not Catholic, you tend to respect the fact that people are, in their place of worship, and you shouldn't be yelling and shouting and screaming, and you should be quiet and respectful of that. And when you talk to your partner, you just kind of mumble talk to them quietly, and they mumble talk to you back. You don't shout or anything else. So yeah, and it was quite beautiful. Like again, that much gold leaf isn't really my style, but hey, that's all right. Different people.
Yeah, everybody's got their own thing.
Exactly.
So, after you get with all the traveling and have all the fun, at what point is it like, okay, we should probably go back to Australia?
It probably actually the conversation probably started after about 3 years of being there, and we started talking about, well, what is our long-term plan here? Um, and so we kind of decided, well, all right, because we got engaged, and then we started talking, well, how are we going to get married and where are we going to get married?
Did you get engaged under Big Ben?
No, so my wife's ancestry is Scottish. And she comes from the Davidson clan, which comes from an area of Scotland called Tulloch. And so we went on a holiday to Scotland, and I found a waterfall on the northern shores of Loch Ness, which isn't too far from her clan. And so I proposed there, and then took her for lunch in Tulloch Castle, which is her old clan castle, which is now a restaurant and B&B and everything else.
So when you say clan, is that family or like the entire family back generations too?
So I'm talking about so she was Davidson was her maiden name, and she got that from her father. So there was the Davidson clan, and that is a Scottish name. And so if you go to the official Davidson clan website, which is the website for the clan, there is a genealogy tree on there,
oh, wow.
Which has the tens of thousands of people that still have the surname, and she is listed in that genealogy tree. So she is a direct descendant of the clan of Davidson. And so, yeah, most of the Scottish clans that survived the wars, 'cause some clans got completely wiped out by the English, or by each other. Most of the clans that survive now maintain these historic genealogy charts of where their people are, and have some sort of, maybe they don't still have their castle, but they might have some sort of building that has, pieces of clan memorabilia that you can go look at. And some of them are bigger than others. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
How was Scotland?
Yeah.
Is it just as beautiful as it looks as on the pictures?
Oh, Scotland is absolutely amazing. So we had a really good time. We just we caught the train up to Edinburgh. Went and saw the Fringe Festival because you got to tick that off. And then we just hired a car, and we had booked Airbnbs around Scotland, and just drove around to these different Airbnbs. And when you get up into the actual Highlands of Scotland, it's beautiful country. It's all rugged mountains, and little one roads, and you're just kind of driving up through there, and you can go an hour or two and not see any other civilization. It's just sheep fields and meadows, and you might see the occasional stone hut somewhere. Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. And then you get to the very northern part of Scotland, and the beaches up there. If you take a photo and look at the photo, you'd swear it was a beautiful, warm summer's day, and you should go swimming in that water, because you got this wonderful sand and this nice, bright blue water. It's only the fact that we took the photo, we're like, no, it was freezing cold that day. Like, there's no way we're getting in that water. But yeah, no, Scotland was really beautiful. So we really enjoyed that. Went to the Isle of Skye, which is that northwestern part of Scotland, which is separated off the mainland. And we got to travel around there. So no, it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, really good.
Nice.
And they still hate the English. So yeah.
You said bucket list a little earlier, and that's kind of on my bucket list, is to go tour that side of the world, because it's a fascinating place for me, and I definitely want to go check it out. I want to see Big Ben. That's my.
You want to see Big Ben?
Yeah.
Well, so Big Ben obviously is not the tower. Big Ben is the bell inside the tower.
Mm-hmm.
The tower is called the Elizabethan Tower, named
Mm-hmm.
after the Queen. But one thing I did get to see with Big Ben was that they have to reset the clock for daylight saving twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I managed to, it's on their website, we're going to be doing this at this time, whatever. And I managed to watch it, which is cool because they actually disconnect the clock mechanism. So you see the hands do like a complete 11-hour cycle spin in like 5 seconds. The hands spin
Really?
really, really fast and reset back to midnight. And then they reattach everything and then they move it manually to like 5 minutes past and turn it back on. It was pretty cool. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. I did
that
not
was
know
one of the
that.
things I wanted to see. Yeah.
So do you actually get to go see Big Ben? Like, can you actually go see it?
I don't know if you can go inside and actually see the bell itself. I don't know if that's visible to anyone. I mean, in
Mm.
terms of the clock tower, I mean, you can see it from most of central London. It
Mm-hmm.
is still a very tall monument, and most people can see it. And you don't exactly use it in place of your watch, but yeah, it does set time. Yeah.
Well, thank you for correcting me on that, because every time I hear Big Ben, I just see a picture of the tower, not the actual bell.
Yeah. Technically, it's the bell is called Big Ben, and the tower's called the Elizabethan Tower. It's one of
Okay.
those things. But yeah, and it's attached to the Houses of Parliament, so it's part of Parliament House.
Mm-hmm. How was the Parliament House? Did you get? Did you
Uh,
go in there or
I
tour
never,
it?
I never went into Parliament House. It
Yeah.
didn't, I don't know, it didn't really inspire me to want to go into. Some of the places that's worth seeing though. So we did. It's worth doing the Natural Portrait Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. They have portraits of people from thousands of years. So that's definitely worth going into and seeing. Um, uh, Also, people think of London Bridge. So, the bridge that everyone sees in all the photos that has the blue and white big cables and the twin
Mm-hmm.
towers every side. So that's technically Tower Bridge. London Bridge is just a plain old concrete bridge, not very exciting at all.
Oh.
Tower Bridge is a really pretty one, which looks amazing and is attached to the Tower of London, hence its name. Tower of London is definitely worth going into. You can
Okay.
see the crown jewels, and they have like huge copies of armor that's been worn by the different monarchs over the years and weapons and all this other kind of stuff. So yeah, the Tower of London is definitely cool and worth seeing.
Do they have the crown that the Queen got coronized in?
So in theory, yes, all the crown jewels are kept in the Tower of London, but like when we were there, some of the pieces were out because they were being used or worn or clean or something
Mm-hmm.
else. So, but technically, yes, all the crown jewels are kept in the Tower of London.
Because
You can go
I
and
watched
see
a
it.
little video of her talking about that, and she was like, "That thing will break your neck if you're not ready for it."
Oh, yeah, they're meant to be. I mean, when you look at the crowns, they're big, solid hunks of metal, and gold's not a
Yeah.
light metal. Gold's a very heavy metal. And yeah, they're gold and platinum, and then they've got these big rocks on them, and yeah, they don't look. It doesn't look comfortable to wear, and like even you watch the coronation, and they don't look comfortable wearing them. They
No.
look like they're standing very still and trying not to move all the time. So
Like, as soon as it goes over, they just gone.
yeah, yeah. Which is why I think whenever you watch a movie or something and there's a king that has to actually wear a crown, they're never wearing a crown like that. They're always wearing the little tiny,
Mm-hmm.
something that you can kind of move your head around in because you couldn't walk around and you certainly couldn't do battle wearing something like that on your head. It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're getting to that decision of going back to Australia.
Hmm.
So how long did it take you to make the decision and finally get back there?
So we probably took us a couple of months of conversations to decide, all right, well, we're going to move back and we're going to move back in about 14 months, thereabouts. And then so what we started doing was we put a date in for our wedding, which was going to be about 4 or 5 months after we moved back. So we figured that was enough time to move back and get everything sorted. And then the next big thing we did is, well, we're here for about another year. Let's go through that bucket list and sort out all the things we haven't done yet that we want to do and make sure we tick everything off, because we knew that if we go home and get married and have kids, we're not traveling for a while. Like that's going to come off the book. So we made a really big bucket list, and then we sat down and just booked a whole lot of flights and holidays and everything else for all the things that we hadn't yet gotten to see, and just ticked them off and went through them. So yeah, that was really good.
What was the number one thing on the bucket list?
That we hadn't gotten to yet. I hadn't yet seen Gaudi's Cathedral in Barcelona. I really wanted to go see that. Absolutely amazing building, still being built 150 years later, so it's not finished yet. But that was absolutely amazing.
Still,
Um,
still being
yeah,
built?
yes, still being built. Yeah, they're still
Really?
building it. Yeah,
Interesting.
cathedrals take a long time to build. They're
Yeah.
very big, and they're building it using traditional methods. So they've got cranes and
Okay, so
everything,
that that
but
would that would have
yeah,
been one of my questions. Like, is it based on
it's
old
stonework and
structure?
stained
Okay,
glass.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, they're still building it to Gaudi's design, which is all stonework and stained glass and everything. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, if you Google, Gaudi's Cathedral, yeah, it's an amazing place. We still wanted to chase the midnight sun, so go above the Arctic Circle and see a place where the sun never sets, and do that. So that was on our list of things to do.
How was
Um,
that?
yeah, that was cool. So we went to a place called Tromsø in Norway,
Mm-hmm.
which is so the Arctic Circle is actually the line that says above this line you get at least 1 day a year of no sun or all sun.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that line means. And so yeah, Tromsø is above the Arctic Circle, and we went there in the middle of summer. And even then, though, it's still snow everywhere there because it's cold. It's up in the northern hemisphere, and yeah, the sun never set while we were there. So we were there for 3 days, and yeah, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the sun's still up in the sky. It's just how it is. So obviously they're prepared for it as a town. So all the hotels have blackout curtains, so you can actually black the hotel room out and try and get some sleep. But yeah, you go out drinking at a bar, and we went with a couple of mates, and you step out of the bar at the middle of the night, and it's daylight outside, and it's
That
a little bit weird, but that's cool.
that would be a little bit weird. Like,
Yeah, so
wow.
that was definitely on our list of things to go do. So we managed to tick that off, which was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I wanted to go see I wanted to go to Poland, and I wanted to see Auschwitz.
Mm.
So and Birkenau, which is the kind of the one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm very glad I did it. I think yeah, it's a really creepy place.
I
It
bet.
just is. Yeah, to know the number of people that didn't die but were murdered,
Yeah.
in that place. The actual chambers themselves are now demolished. They were bombed a couple of days after liberation. They collapsed the chambers. Um, but what they've done is they've kept some of the huts where they used to live, and keep them. They've kept them restored so that you can see what that's like. And that train platform you see from Schindler's List, where the trains come in and they'll get taken off, that was filmed at Auschwitz, and that is the actual train platform. It's still there, so you can go
Oh,
stand on that
really?
train platform, and the tracks are there up to the gate and everything. Yeah, and the actual gate into Auschwitz, which has it says in German, "Work will set you free," which was obviously a lie because no one ever left. Everyone died at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and there's one gas chamber left. So there was four big gas chambers and a fifth small one, and that chamber survived. And you can actually go into that gas chamber and stand in there. And it's very creepy. But I think one of the really touching things of being there is that there was a group of, I don't know, maybe 20 or so. I'm going to put them around 20 years of age, Jewish. I'm going to say students, because they looked like that kind of aging group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at one point, dressed in, I guess more traditional Israeli robes, they were singing and dancing on top of where one of the gas chambers used to be, because now it's just a grass mound. And they were singing and dancing their songs, and we couldn't understand it because the songs were all in Yiddish. But it was quite a powerful moment of, despite everything that happened, the Nazis lost in more ways than one, because it turns out in the end that the Jews are still here, and now they're singing and dancing where you thought you would end them. And so that was quite a special thing to watch them do, and they were clearly doing it as this, I guess, point of pride and point of protest against the Nazis that are no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of really powerful and amazing to watch. I'm glad we got to watch them do that,
Mm-hmm.
and see them celebrate their lives, and probably also at the same time commemorate. I'm sure they all had ancestors that they lost during the war. But,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I'm glad that they've kept that place the way they have. So what's really hard is it's a really beautiful part of Poland. You know, it's all lovely green meadows that has dandelions coming out of it, you know, surrounded by these big pine trees. And when we were there, we had these great big blue skies with just a couple of white clouds. And, you know, it's really picturesque. And if you didn't know that those huts and cabins that were there were part of a concentration camp, you could almost believe it was part of like a holiday camp. You know, it looks like the kind of place you could pay a bit of money to and go live in a cabin for a couple of days.
Something you see on a
And
postcard.
yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
was really picturesque. It's only, you know, but then you have to remind yourself, no, this is not a pretty place. You know, this is a terrible, you know, evil place. And just to think the numbers through that many people were killed, like over a million people. Like that's a lot of people. Like that's a really hard number to get in your head. You know, so. But yeah, I'm glad we did that. That was. Yeah, that was good to go do. And I think, again, one of those things, I think if more people went out and saw these kind of places and experienced these kind of things, I think we'd have maybe a little less anguish in our lives, you know, a little bit less hatred. I think people can go,
lot
you know,
more getting along,
yeah,
which is what
right?
this world needs.
It's exactly right. You don't need to, like, you can have differences of opinion and that's fine, but we don't need to turn it into wars and hate. Like, that doesn't get anyone anything.
No,
right?
no, absolutely. I always say, don't have an argument, have a healthy debate.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's how I always try and put it. So you get a couple things checked off the bucket list, and now you're heading back to Australia.
Now we're heading back home. So that was an interesting time. And the main reason it was interesting is the job that I was doing, I was headhunted to help prep a company to be purchased by another company, which was a whole interesting role. And they kind of had a timeline that they wanted to work towards. But my wife had to travel to some South American countries for work, and then they were transferring her back to Brisbane. That was the agreement, that they'll transfer her back to Brisbane. And it just turned out that the only way we could make the timetable work is that she would move back to Brisbane 2 months before I did. She spent the next month after she moved back traveling through South America anyway.
Oh, really?
Then she would come back, and then she would come back to London for a work meeting, funnily enough. So she'd be back in London for a couple of days, and then she would be back in Australia for her job. So it ended up being that essentially she moved back 2 months before I did, and it was just the only way we can kind of make it all work. But that's what you got to do, right? So that was a little bit kind of tricky. But then, we moved back, and you've got re-entry can be tricky and difficult. You know, you're used to a certain way of life. You've got your friends and everything else, and you've had to say goodbye to them. And you know, it's yes, we've got Skype and we can video call and Facebook and all that other kind of stuff. But you also know that some of these people you're just never going to see again. Like, that's just the nature of the modern world that we live in. So, but yeah, so you move back. We house sat for a relative for a couple of months until we could, get our own rental together and everything else like that. And we obviously had to I had to try and find a job. So, my wife got the transfer back, but I had to go out and get my own job. And so it's kind of like doing the whole thing in reverse. You come back and you realize you don't really have anything. You pretty much just have your suitcase again. And, some people, because we were away for 4 years, some people just kind of grow a bit distant in that time, and you just don't see them. Obviously, your family and your close friends you'll see again and all that kind of stuff. But so in some respects, it's like coming back to another foreign country, and everyone mocks you because they think you have an English accent now. And it takes a little bit of time to get the English out and come back to your native accent.
Was that the case for you?
Everyone told me. I didn't think I had one, but everyone told me that I had one. And I've been told that I will still have some English tendencies in my language now. Certain turns of phrase that I use that, I picked up while I was living there. And I'm sure it's the same for everyone, that's what your language is, right? It's what you've collected from all the places and people you've been and all that kind of stuff. You developed this particular language. So that's all right. Something different.
So Dan, throughout your entire life story, what would be the one thing for someone who wants to travel like you did? What would be the one piece of advice that you would give them?
Don't wait for the perfect time. There's no such thing as the perfect time to travel. The only perfect time to travel is right now. So if you think you want to do it, just get out there and do it. And you can start small. You don't have to move overseas. Like, if that's a bit too much, then just do the little trip overseas for just a week or two, and take your mates. But yeah, get out there, travel, see other places.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a country that doesn't speak your language and learn to order coffee in someone else's language, and get that experience, and try some new food, yeah. But yeah, don't wait, just get out there and do it. 100%. I think everyone should travel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would do a world of good to the world if everyone realized that they're just one of 7 billion and that it doesn't revolve around them.
Yeah. Yeah. When you zoom out, we live on this, giant blue and green ball. Let's make the best of it. Let's make the best of it.
Exactly. So yeah, no, get out there and do it. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spoken to other people about it, and said, "Oh, what do you think? Should I do it?" I'm like, go for it. The worst thing that's going to happen is it's not going to work out, and you're going to be back home in 4 months, and you're going to have spent some money. But what's the point in having money if you're not going to use it?
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen to that. So, Dan, where can we find you? Any social medias? Any websites?
Yeah. So I've got my social media. Daniel B. Ferri at Twitter. I have my own business. I'm a business coach and consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's accordconsultancy.com.au. You'll find me on there. And also with obviously LinkedIn, I'm on there. So most of my posting these days is probably more work orientated. So it's on LinkedIn and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm around. Yeah.
I will definitely make sure to link those in the show notes for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. And it was just a great story to hear, sir.
No. Look, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I just enjoyed talking to people and telling some stories and sharing what little pearls of wisdom I've managed to find. So yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. And sir, you have yourself a great night.
Oh, well, you too.
See ya.
See you, mate. Bye.